This is Athens. Fewer places on earth have a richer history. It's such a unique place because it blends modern culture with ancient history. It's really unique here when you consider in the United States, some of our oldest buildings are only a couple hundred years old. You compare that with the building I'm standing in front of, 2,500 years old, it's quite spectacular. We're here on the Athenian Acropolis. In Greek, the word Acropolis breaks down into two words. Akros meant highest or upper, and polis meant city. So literally, Acropolis means the highest or the upper portion of the city, which is exactly where we are. Standing directly behind me is the Parthenon. The Parthenon was built in the 5th century BC, and it was the house of the Greek virgin goddess Athena, who was protector of Athens. Greek culture came to prominence in 336 BC when Alexander the Great came to power at merely the age of 20 years old. As he systematically conquered lands throughout the Mediterranean world, Greek culture began to influence all those different places that they conquered. That Greek influence over cultures was known as Hellenization. So whether it was Persian or Babylonian or Egyptian or Israeli, all those different cultures mingled with Greek, and that was Hellenization. It wasn't classical Greek culture, it was a mixture of all of these. This Hellenization of the world wasn't necessarily all bad. It had good things. For instance, there was a common language that pretty much anywhere within the world that you went at that time, people spoke a version of Greek known as the Koine, or the common language. This would have been excellent for commerce and trade. Would have been really easy for people to speak the same language, get on the same page. It was good for commerce and business. Obviously for like philosophy and worldview and religion, this posed some serious problems, particularly for the early church, because paganism and idol worship was in stark contrast to the message of the apostles, of Jesus, and the Old Testament. Take, for example, the 10 Commandments. What was the very first commandment? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Basically, don't worship idols, which was in exactly the opposite of the Hellenization push. The Greeks had a god for everything, so much so that when Paul was here in Acts chapter 17, this is what he had to say to them. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply troubled by all the idols he saw everywhere in the city. So then later on Mars Hill, when he was debating and talking with the leading minds of the city, he said that he had noticed an idol made to an unknown god. And he said that they made this idol because they didn't want to offend a god that maybe was out there, and so they made this idol just in case, so they wouldn't offend some out there unknown god. So like I said, the Greeks had a god for everything. There was Dionysus. He was the god of wine. If you wanted to celebrate to him and worship to him, you would participate in these festivals known as Dionysia. And those became so vulgar and evil at some point in time that they were actually outlawed during Roman rule. You had Demeter, who was god of grain and the lord of the harvest. If you wanted your crops to be blessed, you'd better sacrifice to Demeter. There was Asclepius, the god of healing. So if you had a physical need in your body that you wanted healing for, you would go to the Asclepium and you would offer sacrifices and participate in Asclepius worship. Poseidon was god of the sea, Hades of the underworld, Nike of victory, and so on and so on. You get the point. The concept was simple. Whatever needs you had, you go to that god and you worship and you sacrifice in hopes that they would meet your need to whatever thing that you were looking to get. In Temptations chapter 3, we teach you that if you're going to overcome temptation, you've got to learn how to let God meet your needs as opposed to having the world meet your needs. In this class, Temptations chapter 3, one of the ways we teach you to overcome temptation is you've got to learn how to allow God to meet your needs instead of running to what the world says can meet your needs. For the early church, that would have meant you don't go to Asclepius for healing. You don't go to Demeter for good crops. You don't go to Poseidon for safe sea travel. You go to Jesus and you allow him to meet your needs in his timing and in his way. Listen, the same concept is true for us here today. You don't go to the things of the world that promise you they can fulfill and meet your needs. You go to Jesus. As you go to Jesus, you'll find, just like the early church did in a wicked pagan world, that he was enough to get them through. He was enough to help them overcome the temptation that Hellenization was pushing into their lives, trying to crowd out God. If you'll do just like the early church did, and if you'll learn to run to Jesus and allow him to meet your needs instead of going to the world, you'll find that just like the early church, he will be enough for you to overcome temptation.